What's up, guys, and welcome to the Foot and Fist Network. Today we're going to be going over UFC 201's fight card. This is going to be a bit of a preview, so I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the main fights. I'm probably not going to go over every single one of them from the prelims, but I will be going over the ones that I find the most interesting. Starting off with Jorge Masvidal versus Ross Pearson. Now, I said Jorge, but it's really Jorge, so I apologize to that. Now, this is going to be an interesting fight because Ross Pearson fought, I think it was 2 weeks ago. He was on the Joanna Jędrzejczyk chart. Yeah, that name always confuses me. So he was on the fight that was on the Friday right before his UFC 200. So it's interesting to see him making such a quick comeback. That was a difficult loss for him against Will Brooks. He didn't take that much damage in it, so it does make sense that he could be back in 2 weeks, sort of cowboy type of style. And it should be interesting to see what he can do against Jorge Masvidal, who is a very tough fighter. He's a very interesting striker. The thing is that he has lost 3 of his last 4 fights via split decision, and just in general, he pretty much always goes to a decision. I can't remember the last time he actually scored a finish. So overall, this is going to be an interesting fight. I think it's going to be a 3-round war. It's going to be a stand-up fight. It's going to be a brawl. I think that Jorge Masvidal will be too much for Ross Pearson. I think that Pearson is a very tough guy, but his technical ability just isn't quite at the same level as Jorge Masvidal. I think it's going to be a tough 3-round battle, and it's going to end with a Masvidal split decision. Next up, we're going to talk about Ian McCall versus Justin Scoggins. Now, Uncle Creepy Ian McCall is one of my favorite fighters out there. He has been my favorite flyweight fighter since the beginning of the division, basically. I really do like Demetrius Johnson. I think he's also a great personality, and it really does suck to see that he can't really get the kind of popularity that someone like him deserves based on his technical ability, just his pure pound-for-pound greatness, and actually his really entertaining personality. I mean, you can even see on UFC now, he's actually probably more entertaining than anybody on that show. Not that it takes a whole lot to be more entertaining than Kenflo, but still, he's a very interesting guy. He's a very entertaining guy, and his live streams on Twitch basically shows that. He's really funny. Anyway, so Ian McCall is also one of those guys who's probably the second biggest personality, if not the biggest personality in that flyweight division. And it really is a shame that he hasn't been able to do more because of his injuries and stuff like that, because that would have really given the division a chance to grow, to have someone very entertaining actually carrying the banners for the division and possibly actually become a bigger division than it is, because it's at this moment, people seem to have a very hard time being entertained by guys that are so small, and I think Ian McCall could have changed that. Now, he comes up against Justin Scoggins, who a lot of people compare to Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. I don't know if he's going to be able to compete with Ian McCall at this moment, because I think Ian McCall, over his recent career, he is still one of the top guys in the division, and Justin Scoggins hasn't quite taken on people of his skill level yet, so it is going to be a jump in competition for him, and we don't really know what he's going to be able to do against somebody of that caliber. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that he can compete just because of how good he is, and he's also really young, so he has so much room to grow. But I think Ian McCall, I'm going to have to favor him just because of his experience, and just because we know that, he does have what it takes to compete with anybody. In my opinion, he beat Demetrius Johnson in their first fight. He was blown out in the second fight they had, but still, you can't discount the fact that he should have been the first, UFC flyweight champion, or at least had gone to the final against Joseph Benavidez. And Ian McCall, I think it's going to go to a decision, but it's going to be a close one. So next up, we have Matt the Immortal Brown versus Jake Ellenberger. This is an interesting fight just because there's a sort of a contrast in styles. Now, Matt Brown is one of those kickboxers who you can't really put away unless your name is Robbie Lawler, and even he wasn't able to finish him. Jake Ellenberger has been on a big skid as of late. Ever since moving to Edmund's gym, things have just not gone well for him. But to be fair for the guy, nobody does well when they move over to Edmund, and there's really just nothing you can do other than actually leave his gym. If I'm not mistaken, he has left his gym. I haven't seen anything about him in the Embedded series and in the Countdown show, so I'm assuming he isn't there anymore, and that would probably be the best choice he could possibly make for the growth of his career. So is he going to be able to beat Matt Brown? I think he does have the tools to do it, because Matt Brown's weakness is wrestling, and Jake Ellenberger, although he doesn't have the kind of college pedigree that a lot of other guys have, he does have the MMA grappling that could give Matt Brown a lot of problems. Now, the big question is what Jake Ellenberger is going to show up, because we always know what Matt Brown's going to show up. He's going to go out there, he's going to do his best to knock your head off, and he's not going to stop until you put him to sleep, or until he puts you to sleep. Now, Jake Ellenberger doesn't quite have that luxury of never, actually not showing up. What I mean by that is half the time he is hesitant. He can't really seem to pull the trigger, even though he does have the qualities to do it. And if he does that against Matt Brown, if he just doesn't show up like he does, every once in a while, then he's going to be in deep, deep shit because Matt Brown will not give you an inch. If you don't take his height off, he is not going to let you rest. And I think that's going to be a big problem for Jake Ellenberger. If he does show up, though, he has the tools because he has that big power and he has the wrestling. And it'll be interesting as well to see what kind of gas tank he has, because we've seen in his career that he does seem to gas out, because when he throws every single punch with all the power that he has, that tends to gas him out, and that's something that will come into play in the Woodley fight as well. So it'll be interesting to see what Jake Ellenberger could do here. I think it's going to be a Matt Brown win. I'm actually going to go with a third-round finish. I think it's going to be a TKO, but it will be an entertaining fight. So next up, we have the co-main event between Rose Namajunas and Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Don't really know how to pronounce that name too well, so I apologize to any Polish people that may or may not be listening to this. Now, this is going to be an interesting fight as well, excuse me, because Rose Namajunas is a very entertaining fighter, I guess you could say. She kind of reminds me of a shittier version of Joanna. That's not to be disrespecting to Rose, but Joanna is pretty much, in my opinion, the most entertaining female fighter there is. And Rose has sort of a similar quality in the sense that she goes and goes and goes and goes and goes, but she doesn't have anywhere near the skill in the Muay Thai and the kickboxing and things like that. However, Rose Namajunas does have a better ground game, I would say, than Joanna. We've seen her throw flying arm bars. We've seen her do some pretty unorthodox stuff on the ground. However, Karolina Kowalkiewicz, she is also a very, very good striker. We've seen in her fights lately that, much like her Polish country, whatever, much like Joanna, she is actually very, very, very technical. And, this really could be a barn burner. Now, a lot of people, myself including, don't really pay much attention to the women's fighting, don't really particularly care for it. But I do think that there are some fights out there that will be entertaining. I think this will be one of them. Now, the winner of this fight could possibly go in for a title shot. Now, with Claudia Gadelha out of the running because of 2 losses to Joanna, there really isn't one clear person. I think that if Rose Namajunas does win this fight, then there is no doubt that she will be getting the title shot. However, if Karolina wins, then she might have to do one more fight just to see if there's somebody else out there that can, contend. You'd have to really take a look at who is there in the division, and I think that most likely this is a test for Rose Namajunas to see if she is getting the title shot. However, it was Sean Shelby, I think, on UFC Watchlist show that was talking about how this is basically a job interview to see who does fight Joanna next. So I'm assuming that the winner of this will fight for the title. Now, I'm going to be pulling for Karolina just because she seems kind of entertaining, and I don't know, I want to see an all-Polish fight for some reason. Whereas Rose, we've already seen that she has fought for the title and she couldn't quite cut it against a chick like Carla Esparza. So I have a hard time believing that she could actually beat Joanna. So I'm going to be pulling for Karolina. However, I don't really know which one's going to go out there and win. I think it probably will be a decision, and I will be actually saying that Rose will win. I think it's going to be a 29-28, so not a split decision, but it will be a close decision. Last but not least, let's talk about Robbie Lawler versus Tyron Woodley. Now, even though a lot of people don't really care about this fight, or at least the UFC hasn't been pushing it as much as they probably should, because everybody knows that when Robbie Lawler fights, it's going to be a fight of the year candidate. I think that people are sort of overlooking this one, A lot of people think that Tyron Woodley isn't going to be a challenge for him, or the fact that Tyron Woodley hasn't earned it. And in part, they're right. He probably hasn't earned it because his last win, I think, was a split decision over Kelvin Gastelum, who isn't even ranked in the top 5. So it's kind of hard to justify giving somebody a title shot off of that win. Now, he was going to fight Johnny Hendricks, and he probably would have beaten Johnny Hendricks considering how far Johnny Hendricks has slipped down the pecking order at this rate. But still, it's kind of hard to justify. He did lose recently. I think it was 2 fights ago or 3 fights ago, he did lose to Rory McDonald. So, he's 2-1 in his last 3 fights. It's kind of hard to justify him having a title shot. However, the UFC has given it to him, and I think that a lot of people underestimate what he can do against Robbie Lawler. Now, Robbie Lawler is by far the better striker. He's got maybe not more power, but he is the more technical striker. He has amazing head movement and things like that, even though it doesn't seem like he always gets beat the hell up. But he's very, very good on the feet. Now, Tyron Woodley is a very fast guy. He got a lot of power, and his striking is more rudimentary, but it's also pretty good. Now, what's going to be the biggest difference here? Number one, we know that Robbie Lawler can go 5 rounds and be more fresh in the 5th round than he actually is in the 1st round. Tyron Woodley does not have that luxury. We've seen him countless times go into the 2nd round already being tired, and it's just because he carries so much muscle and he puts everything he has in every single punch, and he tends to just wing at everything and try to knock people out. More than anything, he looks for the knockout instead of letting the knockout go to him. Now, that's a very dangerous game against Robbie Lawler, because if you find yourself in the 5th round with no gas tank and Robbie Lawler is pissed off as ever, he's going to finish you. You just don't have a chance of escaping, because he will not let you move until you're out cold. Now, Woodley does have the wrestling, which is something that Robbie has had a problem with. Now, we saw against Rory McDonald that amazing Superman sprawl, or whatever you want to call it, on Rory McDonald. I think it was in the 3rd round. So Robbie Lawler does have some really, really, really good takedown defense. However, Tyron Woodley is a different kind of monster compared to Rory McDonald in the takedown department. And if Woodley can implement his game plan, which is probably going to be, stay a bit on, I don't know about staying on the outside, but definitely trying to get Robbie to the ground and pounding him out a little bit right there. Sort of like Johnny Hendricks did, but with more damage, because Johnny just held him there and just pissed off Robbie. I think that Woodley does have a chance. Now, the thing is, this is where the cardio comes into play, because we know that Robbie Lawler can go 5 rounds being taken down and held there and being wrestle-fucked by Johnny Hendricks and stuff like that, and still come out in the 5th round and want to destroy him and have so much energy. Is Tyron Woodley going to be able to wrestle Robbie Lawler for 3-4 rounds and still have the energy to fight him in the last round and not get knocked out? I don't really know. There's this huge problem in Woodley's game, which is cardio, and that's a hard thing to deal with when you have a guy like Robbie Lawler, or even like a guy like Carlos Condit and stuff like that. So I have to take an eye on that. At this point, it's hard to bet against Robbie Lawler, because basically you are not going to beat him in a decision. He's going to win 1 round, and then he's going to win the 5th. The 5th round, you can already go ahead and say it's going to be a 10-9, if not a 10-8. It's going to be a Robbie Lawler win. So you have to win, rounds 1 through 3. You just have to do that, or at least try to win 4. And, Carlos Condit pretty much just proved. Carlos Condit beat him, I think it was he beat him in all rounds except for maybe the 5th. Without a doubt, he lost the 5th, but I think he lost only 1 other round other than that, and he still ended up losing the fight. So it's impossible to beat Robbie Lawler in a decision, or it's at least next to impossible to beat him. And it's next to impossible to finish the guy, because his chin is hellacious. The guy literally does seem like he was spawned from hell. So what's Tyron Woodley going to be able to do? I don't really know. I think it's going to be another really, really good fight. I don't know if it's going to be as good as the Carlos Condit fight, because it's hard to match something like that. And especially because Tyron Woodley, he has this style of, sometimes he shows up, sometimes he doesn't, much like the Jake Ellenberger thing. A lot of times he's there, a lot of times he isn't. And if Tyron Woodley doesn't show up, then it's going to be a very bad night for him. However, if he does show up, and if he comes in with his cardio on point, then he does have a chance. Overall, though, I find it really hard to bet against Robbie Lawler at this stage of his career, so I'm going to have to go with a Robbie Lawler decision or a finish in the 5th round. But either way, it's going to be Lawler once again for the title, and then we get to see the fight that everybody really wants to see, which is Robbie Lawler versus Wonderboy Thompson, and that's going to be one hell of a fight. So I hope to see you guys again, and hope to be talking about that fight in the coming future. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button. Please subscribe to the channel. I'll see you next time.